Welcome to the show today. Today I have Ian Roberts on the show, and he's the CTO at Bühler. And I'm very, very excited to talk to you today. Dive a bit into your story, hear about what you see in the world, where things are going, talk a little bit about leadership, some of the lessons you learned. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you, Daniel.
Thank you for being here. So let's dive right into your story. Ian, can you share a little bit about your journey and especially about some of the moments that you feel really shaped you as a human being, shaped you as a leader along the way?
So look, if we go back to studies, I studied in the UK. I'm British. I spent a bit of time in academia. I would say I did my PhD ostensibly so that I could grow up enough and be mature enough that somebody could offer me a job. I came to Switzerland for the most noble of reasons. I met my now wife, and she was finishing her PhD in Switzerland. So I came over, I got a job with Nestle, integrated into a new environment, moved into basic research, realized that for me, basic research was very important, but an awful long way from the business. So I wrote to the then head of R&D for the company, it was Nestle, and proposed that we build up scientific networks where we standardize, where we ensure we have the same skills, where we eliminate duplication of solving the same problems, and we work together to build a group level kind of competence and capability. So maximize the firepower. And that sort of got things moving. I built that up. I moved towards the market, to product development, doing R&D for global brands. That got me out into the markets, understanding consumers more, getting close to the local tastes, varieties, requirements. Then I moved into business, more the business side, consulting for the group. Where does Nespresso build its factories, its distribution centers? How do you get more profit out of a business in the US? What do you restructure? Which brands do you keep? And I specialized in global innovation strategies. Thereafter, I got a call that said, Ian, it's all nice on paper. Well done. Why don't you come to Mexico and actually make it happen? So I went to Mexico to run innovation in Mexico. And you get your fingers burnt, but you also learn an awful lot. And that freedom was fantastic. And that learning experience was fantastic. And we can touch on some of those points afterwards. And then after a few years, I was kind of hitting that critical point of my 40th birthday, thinking, I love this company, it's great, but is this it for life? Should I do something else? And I met a gentleman called Calvin Guida, who is then was the CEO of Bühler. And we just got on. And I met this guy and I thought, this is someone I will learn so much from working with. And I can take those learnings, I can develop, I can go from B2C to B2B, I can go from 80 billion to 2 billion turnover, from consumer goods to machine business, publicly listed company to family-owned company. And I thought this was just brilliant. And I guess that was the first lesson, which I have to attribute more to my wife than to me, was coming home from that meeting and saying, I met this guy and I really like him, and it won't be easy. He's very demanding, but it's going to be a fantastic learning experience. And we share a vision of what we could do with this company. And my wife, being super smart, said, okay, you chose your boss. Step one, go and check the values of the company. Go and check you can work there. Go and check it's true. And that's what we did. And so then we came together. And the Bühler journey is just one of, has been extraordinary. If you're in a family company where the values effectively are set by how do you manage a family? If I take a decision today in my family, it's for the children. It's not for me, because you have to think on that timescale. And that's how we run the company. And on the other side, we demand technology leadership. So those two things, if you're in a CTO role, that's kind of bliss, isn't it?
I love that.
So we've driven that, and that's kind of where I sit today now, 8 years into that journey. still smiling, still having fun, and learning an awful lot from these smart young kids around me about digital technologies and how we use them and how we transform the company.
This is very powerful. I mean, the kind of like nugget that I got from that is in terms of, yes, of course, in terms of choosing your boss, because that's a big one. But the other one as well is about the learning. You know, you looked at this as a learning experience, you know, and that is ways beyond what most people look at it. And I think that is so powerful because you get in different you get into different environments when you look at it, or when you're looking for a learning experience, than when you're just looking for a status growth experience, so to say, or anything in that, you know, ego space, I would say. And because this is so powerful, and it gets you into completely different environments where you can grow actually more because of that, because you're open to that, because you understand that when you go through the learning, you grow through it, versus, you know, getting into a thing where you say, okay, I'm the smartest person in the room anyway. This is really powerful, very, very powerful. Now, you know, you mentioned the former CEO of Bühler as somebody that you're really connected with, that made a big impression on you in terms of the learning experience. Were there, and of course you mentioned your wife as well. That was another big person that you mentioned there in terms of that. Is there another person, or are there other people or groups of people that you would call out or say, you know, these are really people that, you know, maybe role models, that people that supported me along the way, people that I could really learn from along the way?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously there's numerous. There's numerous. I remember, I can go back to an interesting experience. So I had a very tough relationship with somebody in one of our big projects, and nothing about the skills capabilities. It was about how we deal with people. I'm not a great one for motivating by fear. You know, I think you encourage, you develop, you educate. You don't shout at people. So that never goes down very well with me, and I find it quite hard not to mention it. And one of my dear colleagues came to me and put an arm around me one day and said, "Come, sit down." He said, "He has been sent by God to make you stronger." And I thought this was a beautiful little story, is to say, stop treating it as a personal battle. This is about development. This is about learning. This is about becoming stronger. And I liked it very, very much. And if you read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, there is a part about an admiral, and he was the highest ranking prisoner of war in Vietnam. And when they asked him, how did he survive? He said, well, you had to be realistic. The optimists die. The realists survive. And he said, if you think you're going to be out by Christmas, when you're not, it kills you. And he said, what I decided to do was make this the defining period, or the period of my life that defines who I become as a character, and take all the strength out of this to build my future. And I think that's a very, very strong message, because whenever we're in hard times, we tend to focus on the here and the now and how much we're suffering. And what we should think about is, how do I grow because of this experience? And how do I become stronger? So I think that's one which was an interesting learning. I'm quite a fan of Collins' books. I'm not a fan of the data he uses, but I'm a fan of the messages. This concept of a personal board. And I have a group of people outside of the company, and a very limited group of 3, who have the right to tell me anything they think about me based on some knowledge of me, which I may not like, but I will listen and I will digest, and they're rarely wrong. And they're very good at putting you back on track if you start becoming less good a human being than you should be.
That is huge. I mean, that, you know, that last message there about the personal board. I love that term, by the way. It's a very different way than most people talk about it. But it puts it into the context of it's personal and it's still business as well. And I love that because it's basically mentoring, but it's different than what most people look at as mentoring. It's not a top-down or bottom-up experience, but it's a peer experience. You exchange with people that are basically your colleagues, but not inside the company, not inside of your environment necessarily, but outside. So they get an outside look into you, so to say, even if it's not, you know, every single day that you spend with them. And that's probably the good thing as well, because they see the edges of you, and they see, you know, the cornerstones and the openness that you're able to bring to the table and say, they're allowed to tell me anything basically they see. This is huge because, you know, most people are not open to that, and then nothing ever changes. There's a certain awareness and certain openness that needs to be at the table in order for this to work. So this is massive. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Now I want to talk about motivations, or like maybe not motivations, but like purpose, passion. I want to know a bit more about what gets you up. So you said, I'm still here 8 years. I'm still smiling. I'm still having fun. And my question is always why? You know, what is it that keeps you going? I mean, there's always fun stuff. There's also challenging stuff every single day, every single week that comes up. Most of it is also a viewpoint, it's a mindset thing. But in general, what is it that gets you up in the morning every single day?
Look, we start with the obvious stuff. I mean, the mission of the company. We shape the company according to where we think it should go. You know, of our technologies, 2 billion people a day eat. 1 billion people a day are moved, so physically moved. So we have the sustainable food side, we have the sustainable mobility. Now, those are two things that come together around the good of humanity. How do we feed 9 billion, 9.8 billion people in 2050? How do we move these people? How do we do this where we have to limit climate change versus pre-industrial times to a maximum of 2 degrees? And we currently haven't got a hope in hell of doing it. So, I mean, if that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning to try and do something about it, then there's probably something a little wrong with you. I think on the business side, if you can solve these major problems, you have a great business. They're worth paying for. So if you can really live the idea of building business by doing good, of thinking for the future, I think that's fantastic. That's why we brought all our customers together and we agreed with them we would reduce energy consumption and waste consumption in their value chains by 30%. That's playing in the food production space alone with 10% of the world's energy requirement. That's a big lever. There you can genuinely bring impact and scale. On the other side, I work with people who are extraordinary. I work in the company with people who are brilliant. I have an executive board that I sit in where I would happily spend evenings, weekends with these people out of choice. We get on very well and we work for the team. And that's a tremendous spirit, and it's very rare. And I've I've been in teams that won tournaments and sports teams and things. Not like this. This is very special, and this binds you together in a common mission. Then we're dealing with the new technologies, the cutting edge technologies. We're dealing with education of young people. This is fantastic. And the talent that is coming in is amazing. I mean, if ever you are feeling uninspired, go and teach a course or give a lecture at a university and tell me that you don't learn a lot. Come down to our startup accelerator at Mass Challenge that we formed with our industry partners and spend a day coaching startups, and then come back and pretend to me that it was you giving knowledge. You know, this is an extraordinary experience. I mean, the idea of opening up ecosystems, partnering with people with a clear purpose of common good in a company that allows you to do this and actually encourages you to do this because you can commercialize these things in the future. I mean, I think that's a fantastic motivation to drive things forward when we certainly face a major challenge with the sustainability of the planet. And it means that you personally can contribute to something that you very, very strongly believe is important. And someone pays you to do it.
Now, there's something you mentioned in the beginning or all over that point, I think it's about doing good. Now, I want to explore that a little bit, because doing good for a long time has been reserved for charities and nonprofits, or at least that's how the world looked at doing good. And now, more and more entrepreneurs, organizations around the world understand that doing good is the only way to build not only a sustainable future, but also a sustainable company.
Sure.
And I want to better understand your viewpoint on that, because you are very deep into this, basically in a very large for-profit organization that does a lot of good. So what's your point of view on that?
Look, I think it's simple. I think philanthropy has a place, but basically philanthropy is an intervention measure. In a disaster, philanthropic support is critical. It is not sustainable, but it's critical. When people are starving, you must get food to them. They're wonderful organizations, the World Food Programme, they do phenomenal jobs, but it's not sustainable. If you cannot, the definition we use is to say, look, a sustainable value chain is one where people can create value, extract wealth in the absence of subsidies with a fair price on resources. Then you have a thriving entrepreneurial business environment, and people have a vested interest to keep it running, and it will become sustainable. It's idealistic, but if you can move towards that, you begin to change things. Because if you have jobs, if you have income, you have adequate nutrition, you have access to education, things begin to change, but it takes time. So that's where we feel that the sustainability of these initiatives comes from the viability of the business plan for all the players in the value chain, not for one individual to strip out value.
That's a very powerful definition there. It's a very clear one as well. And I think that's a great one. If you take that definition and apply it to your organization, I think you can do a lot of good in the process. So thanks for sharing that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about lessons learned. You talked already a lot about that, but I want to dive into more specifics. So you certainly had a lot of interesting experiences along your journey along the way. What are some, or maybe one, of the biggest lessons that you learned along the way, and what was the context around it?
I think the biggest lesson I learned, and the thing that unlocked my capability, was I went on one of these typical management programs, right? And we were in Miami, and we had these personal coaching sessions and things. And we spent a few days together. And the guy, at the end, they gave us a 10-minute feedback. And he said, you need to change how you think about things. You have to become the finest leader of innovation teams and organizations, not the finest innovator. So it comes back to the comment you made earlier about, it's not about being the smartest guy in the room. It's about how do you enable people to be successful? And that triggers a whole thought of how you measure your personal success. So now, if your personal success is measured based on the success of those who have worked with you or for you, you understand your role and you can do it very easily. If your personal success is measured on how important you are, how big your title is, where you went to school, whether you're the CEO, if they're ego-driven, you're actually useless to the organization.
I love that. I love that you're so straightforward about all these things. This is a great one. It's a huge, massive distinction also between sort of like individual performance and an actual team, an actual organization. And let's be honest, today, nobody is an individual performer. Even if they're an expert, even if they're a specialist in a team, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the top executive. Nobody is an individual performer. Nobody can do anything by themselves anymore in this hyper-connected world and economy today. So this is more true than ever before, what you just shared. It's a big, big lesson, definitely. And staying on the topic of leadership, I want to go in that ways more practical. So you've led a massive transformation. Last time we talked, you shared a few bits and pieces from the past 8 years in terms of culture change, in terms of what you guys did in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship and all these fun buzzwords. But I want to really dive more into the practical aspect. So the first one is, for anything you're doing, for anything you're building, how do you get the right people on board?
Inspire them. I mean, you don't tell them people. I mean, you don't tell people to join. You sit down and you say, "This is where we want to go. This is what we want to do." If they're not still in the room building ways of doing it with you, then you haven't inspired them, and you've got the wrong people. I mean, I think it's that simple. You get the people who want to do it. You get the people who you don't have to spend hours aligning them on a common goal and common vision. They just believe in it, and they'll help you do it. That's, for me, is step one. And it's usually a good acid test if you're proposing to do the right thing or not. If no one's with you, it's probably you that's wrong, not them.
That's a good one as well. If you didn't get it, you didn't do anything wrong. It was probably me.
I mean, come on. Do we have bad students or bad teachers? You always have to decide, don't you?
Absolutely. So let's talk a bit more about Inspire. So, I mean, all the way from hiring people for job openings to getting people on board for teams internally, for doing new exciting stuff, building mission teams and stuff like that. How do you go about it? I mean, do you have a specific way of making sure that the right people are on board? Do you really do it in that simple way of saying, here's the vision, here's where we're heading, who's on board, or how do you really go about it?
Look, I mean, we know who believes in what. We know who's good at what. And we do obviously assemble teams according to the skills that you need. But in the end, what makes the difference is how much do people love what they do. And you know, as I said, 2 billion people a day eat products off our lines. How do we ensure those products are safe? How do we ensure they're nutritious? How do we ensure they're affordable? How do we ensure we have enough protein to feed 9.8 billion people in 2050? When today alone, you know, we've got 820 million people hungry. The problems are so in your face, and they're so obvious, and they're so clear, that around those, there is always a topic that fires people up. And then the question is, how do you allow them to contribute to solving that problem? However small the contribution, such that they can say they did it. So I think that's very important. Now, if you look at talent attraction, I mean, this is not about, maybe some of the big companies can still do this, just sit there and wait for people to turn up and ask to work for them. But, you know, in this world now, you have to attract people, and you have to attract them with what you do and why you do it. I mean, this is absolutely critical. You talked about the good, you know, doing good business. But look, in the end, all companies are about people. If you haven't got the right people, you're finished. Now, and if the youngsters don't want to work for you because they don't believe that you honestly pursue your mission or your values, and you don't bring an impact, well, that's a pretty natural cutoff on the future of your company. So being able to attract them is very important. I mean, we're very active outside, but I mean, a little example I give you. There's a wonderful network called Unitech, and it's set up with 10 universities, 10 countries. Each one can propose 20 master students. We take 10 from each one. You get 100 brilliant kids across Europe. You put them through this fantastic program, engineering students. We try and make sure that they're engineers with purpose. Engineers who understand how their skills should be used to develop a better future effectively. Not the sort of engineers that will write software to fix the emissions tests, right? We don't want those engineers anymore. We want the guys who instinctively know right from wrong and do the right thing. So we we do a whole carbon footprint challenge with them. We have a platform, we invite other companies to participate, and we set challenges. And the really good engineers who tackle these challenges are already aligned to where you want to go. So it's a wonderful tool for attracting talent, but it also helps them use their skills in a useful way. So there's a lot, everything has to be win-win.
So talk to me about this challenge thing. This is really interesting. So there's mass challenge, there's the carbon footprint challenge, and you just mentioned challenge a few times. There's
And we
something.
have an innovation challenge internally. People are competitive animals. They love it, right? I think mass challenge is a different story. I mean, mass challenge was, we was kind of the opinion that, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats. And if we really want to drive a, you know, you need GDP growth, you need to ensure that there are jobs for people in the future, that the conversion from the, let's say, the historical roles to the digital roles is as quick and as painless as possible. And to do that, you have to create companies that already employ and develop these new skills. And so Mass Challenge is an obvious one. It's an NGO. So we take no equity from startups. We had 1,000 startups applied this year, of which we took 60 into the program and 10 into a food vertical. And the aim is to give them 12 months of a startup's life in 4 months. This is fully funded by industry partners across Switzerland, and the startups don't have to work with us. But their development is phenomenal. We learn from them, we understand the culture. Sometimes we can help them, sometimes we partner with them, sometimes they go and partner with someone else. But usually it's a good way of getting visibility and raising money for them. So it's the right thing to do, and it helps the culture of the companies. I think it's good for the ecosystem. The Carbon Footprint Challenge is specifically to find talented engineers who have strong desire to solve the global problems and suitable skill sets to do it, and give them a platform to showcase their skills and get some training on how to bring the message across, how to deliver it, how to structure it. And then internally, we run an innovation challenge. We've been running it for 8 years. To give you an example of, we did it this year. We kick off in January. We set a clear strategic guideline. The whole company has the right to participate. 5,500 people engaged. We then took 350, we had 350 business ideas. We went to China, India, South Africa, Brazil, North America, back here. We do a day in each one. We listen to the best 20, 30 ideas. We then take the best 30, we publish them on a platform within the company, and the employees can vote on the one that they want us to go and train and develop. And as an executive board, even if we disagree, there's nothing we can do. We pick 7 or so others that we pull together, and we put them through a fantastic boot camp, and then they pitch to the executive board, and we picked 5 this year to accelerate. And we've just done a review with them, and we're pretty astounded by a couple of them. It's really very, very good. And so this drives innovation, but it also, if you think about a company, everyone in the company, in the hierarchy, has different objectives. And traditionally, your middle management are very operational because that's what we ask them to do. So they're not so open to free people up for thinking, creativity and stuff, because they're delivering their operational targets. Even if they think it's important, there's just not space in their day. And this allows everybody in the company to get immediately to a high level of exposure, to have their ideas discussed and get feedback on them and get coaching on how to do it properly or how to improve, and even have the opportunity to potentially start that up as a new business. So it's a nice program on culture, training, ambassadors. We built our entire e-commerce digital platform to our customers out of this program a couple of years ago. So it also drives huge business relevance and transformation.
This is huge. It reminds me of the X Prize, basically, in terms of, you know, the way of doing it. And what the most inspiring thing about this is it's really about growing the pie. Because if you think about it, what it does is it
Absolutely.
doesn't just optimize, right? No, what it does actually is it it allows it allows the pie to grow, and that is, I think, one of the biggest things we should focus on these days, because, well, most pies are already full, so there's not really that much more you can do within the pies. So you have to focus on growing the pies, and this is really inspiring. And the other thing is, when most of the time when we talk about culture and we talk about anything from hiring people, making people work together better, or anything like that, basically we're trying to fix problems.
Hmm.
We're looking to fix problems. What this does is the complete opposite. It's a bit like the healthcare industry. For any number of years, there's always been about, let's fix the problems, right? Let's give people pills and all these kinds of things. And now there's this massive shift happening to going like, let's figure out how to actually prevent the cause. This is exactly the same thing, but in an innovation setting, in a culture setting, or anything like that. It's not about asking the question of, how do we make people work together better? Meaning, how do we force them to work together better?
Hmm.
How do we, work on a skill level, on all these kinds of things? But you create a vehicle, you create a vision and a vehicle for people to come on board, that people are inspired by, like a challenge, and participate with its strategic goal. But it's not fixing problems. It's basically creating new opportunities. That is incredibly powerful. So that's what I got from this.
Hmm. But it allows you, you bring role models, you bring the company forward, you understand what your employees most care about, what motivates them. It's a great way of spotting the talent, who can make it happen, who plays which roles, who pulls the team together. And I think it inspires the rest of the organization. So it's a win-win.
There's so many things. I just want to stay on that for another second, because it is so powerful. There's a book called The One Thing. I don't know if you read it.
I haven't.
It's basically all about whatever you want to do or accomplish, or however you want to spend your day. Always ask yourself the question: what is the one thing I can do right now that will either accomplish this or move this forward, or basically eliminate it? Eliminate the
Hmm.
need for doing that. And I think that's basically, it's going in the same direction, because you can say, okay, we want to do a culture change, or we need to innovate. So let's think about all the 1,000 things we can do, and then strategically work on all of them and try to figure out which one works, which one doesn't, which once again puts you in the role of the individual performer, because you're trying to figure it out. But what you are doing is you're stepping into that leader role, in the true leader role, and saying, well, we're not going to figure it out. We're creating something where these opportunities, we're creating a vehicle, we're creating a vision where these opportunities can evolve. Other people can engage even outside of the organization. That's a really powerful thing as well. Not only thinking in organizational borders, where we can work together with the entire ecosystem without losing anything, but actually by gaining so much. But we only do part of the work as well. And I think that is absolutely incredible. So I love that you shared that, because it's most of the time it's just a slight shift in the mindset that can make huge impact. And looking at organizational development or growth in a way of no longer fixing problems, but creating something that allows opportunities to emerge, that little shift can make all the difference. So really appreciate you sharing that. Really appreciate that.
We're doing our best.
This is really cool. So last question I have, it's a little bit in the future. So this is the rocking chair question. So let's imagine you're sitting in a rocking chair, you're looking outside of whatever, the mountains, the sea, or whatever, on your terrace or veranda, and you're looking back, at the past 80 years of your life. What is the impact that you would want to see in the world over, that lifetime?
I think I would like to be sat in a rocking chair at about 10 meters altitude and still be above the sea. I think that would be a measure if humankind has managed to adapt to the challenges and do something about it. I would like to be able to look, if I survive long enough, to meet my grandchildren to have a good answer to the question of, Papa, why didn't you do something to stop this happening? Or Grandpa, why didn't you do something to stop this happening? I think that's the only measure. The only measure is if you can look back honestly and say that you tried to do what was right for the development of people and what was right for the company, and not what was right based on greed for your own personal gain. How we measure that is not up to us, is it? In the end, it's the famous, who gives the speech at your funeral? What do you think they're going to say?
Pretty much, pretty much. That's maybe one step before. And so really, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom and your stories and the lessons and all the golden nuggets. So we're going to link below this video to a couple of sources, to LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn page, to the company page. So people can, on the one side, follow on what you guys are up to, on all the exciting stuff that's happening, because you're quite active as well on sharing what's going on, because there's so many exciting things happening. But also connect with you on you know, any kind of opportunity, whether partnerships or investments or whatever fun stuff that comes up. So thank you so much for being here.
Great pleasure. I hope some of it's informative. Cheers, Daniel.